Well, hey everybody, welcome to When We Walk. And this is a little podcast where we sit on a couch and talk about what we talk about when we walk.
Yes.
So I am Micah.
I'm Shireen.
And we're so glad that you're joining us today.
I realized, so I took a walk yesterday all by myself.
I know, sad.
It was very sad. I had to take a walk by myself because you had a medical procedure.
Right.
So there are a lot of people that might not know that 2 months ago, you had a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
Super random and scary.
Very scary.
Maybe we can share that whole story another time because that's a whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But fast forward to 2 days ago.
Yep.
And we resolved the whole thing, hopefully.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You had a procedure to your heart to close a hole they found in your heart. That's a whole nother story we'll share another day. But all that to get to, I had to take a walk.
Recovery.
Yes. So I had to take a walk by myself.
I know, it's too bad.
It was a little bit sad, but also really good because I got to process a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out walks are really good to just process what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Usually we process together, but I was by myself.
Did you know, fun fact, that walking simulates the same kind of brain activity that you experience during REM sleep, which is
really
left, right, left, right, left, right, the way your eyes go. And so when you do that, when your body is doing that, it actually is stimulating your processing mechanisms in your brain.
Oh, wow. So that is why it is good for you to process when you take walks.
Or take jobs.
You guys, we're going to learn so many
bike
things
rides,
on
all
this.
of it. Yeah, isn't that interesting?
In this conversation.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
So I'm processing, obviously. And I realized because I was able to process by myself and I was thinking through, obviously so grateful, talking to the Lord about how grateful I am on this side of it. But I started going back through kind of all of my thinking of how it all started, and especially morning of, right, when you came and you're like, hey, I'm having these weird symptoms. Your speech was slurring, and realizing where my thoughts started going in that moment. Yeah. And then fast forward, we're in the ER and the doctor comes in and says, yes, you've had a stroke and you could still be in it. And where my thoughts went, where your thoughts went.
Yeah, scary.
Right. And as I was thinking about this on our walk, I came home and I was sharing with you and just thought, where our thoughts go can actually lead us into places that are not healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I just kept thinking, I could have gone down some really dark and scary roads in those moments. Mm-hmm. And how much our thought life can lead us into places of, honestly, temptation. Right. Mm-hmm. It is a playground for the enemy to use.
Totally. Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful. I mean, obviously on this side we have a story that ends differently, but I realized I could have gone down to some really scary places. Mm-hmm. And I just kept thinking that is something I think we don't think about. That's the enemy's playground as much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. Big time. I think two areas where our thought life can lead us astray. There's many, but I think two areas where the enemy really loves to do his business in our minds is issues of identity and issues of outcome.
Right.
And so I think when our thought life is taking us down a path of identity, where we're asking questions related to, am I loved? Who am I? Do I have what it takes?
Right.
Do I measure up? What is my worth? What is my value? What do I have to offer the world? Those types of things. If that is not grounded in truth, that can lead to really dangerous places. And then issues of outcomes is kind of the what if questions.
Right.
What if this happens?
Right.
What if things turn out that way? And again, when that line of thought isn't grounded in truth, it can also lead us to a pretty dark place or dangerous place.
Which is kind of where we were in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, wouldn't you say? So when we had that experience, you came in, you told me, you're moving so fast. So it's not like you have a lot of time to process, but then there are those thoughts that slide in those moments that feel so jarring. And then I know for me, after, the doctors came in and they said all that, and then they wheeled you out, I'm just left in this room thinking about all these what ifs, right?
Yeah. So like, what were they? What were some of the things?
So my first one was like, what if he doesn't come back to this room? I know that was very extreme. Yeah. You weren't dying. You're just, your arm wasn't working and you weren't talking very well. But
that's where our mind goes.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario. Yeah.
Right. Worst case scenario. And so I'm thinking, what if they don't wheel him back into this room? What if they do and he can't speak very well?
Yeah, worse than I was before.
Worse than you were before. What if you can't do your job? Like you are a preacher. You need your speech to do the work that you do.
It helps.
What if you can't use your arm anymore? How am I going to live my life? I need you to do things. Right. Turns out I need your help around the house a lot. We don't have little kids that we're lifting up, but I need your help to do a lot of things.
I know. Even that morning when when my left hand wasn't working at all, I was trying to just open up the little jar that my hair stuff is in. That was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so just imagining if that had been forever.
I know. And we were laughing about it now because you have full function. And we're so thankful. And that's not everyone's story. We know that. But like in the moment when that's happening and you have these thoughts, I realized, wait a second, I can keep going down these places and it will lead me to a really not good place. Yeah. But there's something that's like, I don't know what it is. It feels almost comforting. Like if I'm worrying, if I'm going down this place, then I'm doing something. Well, I don't know what that is about our psyche that makes us think that if I'm thinking about it, then that makes me like I'm
in control.
Yes, right. That. But what I realized was like, no, if I keep going down here, I am going to a dark place that's not going to be healthy for either of us in this situation, and to make the right decisions when the doctors ask us for whatever they need. Yeah. And I think, I mean, you can share what your thoughts were too, but I realized I can't anchor here or I'm not going to make it. Yep. And I need to actually combat whatever whether they are lies from the enemy or just my fears in the moment that the enemy can use. Yeah. I have to anchor in the truth. Yeah. That's and good. Who is God? Who has he been to me? Who has he been to us? And I have to anchor there.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times those outcome fears or thoughts can be quieted when we realize that God's in control and that he's good. Right. And I think for me, my thoughts were more when I heard those words and was terrified that, that I was having a stroke or whatever. Right. Were all related to you, the kids, and church. And it all had to do with my role in y'all's lives. Right. Like, will I be able to be the kind of husband you need? Will I be able to be the kind of father that the kids need? Will I be able, like you said, to preach? Will I be able to do my job? And those were all, in a sense, kind of questions around identity, of like, where is my value going to come from? Right. And am I going to be able to offer value to others if I'm limited in some way? Yeah. Now, we know that plenty of people, we're all limited in different ways, and plenty of people are severely limited and still offer great value, but you still have those thoughts, and they're scary thoughts. And I think those thoughts can be quieted when you remember who you are in relationship to God. I think the outcome questions can be quieted when we understand God's in control, and I think the identity questions are quieted when we understand our relationship with the Lord. And I think what God did in me in that moment, kind of the phrase that came to me was that I was broken and brought back, meaning like that's good. In that hearing when the doctor said, like, you've had a stroke and the clot still may be in your brain and we don't know if this is going to get worse or not. There was a breaking in that moment because you realize I'm not in control. Yep. There's nothing I can do about this right now. Yeah. And then that breaking leads you to, there's one or two options you have. You can either just sit in your terror, or you can just surrender, which is by the grace of God, and the prayer you prayed over me and the word you reminded me of in that moment brought me to a place of surrender. And that was kind of broken and brought back. I feel like I was kind of brought back to the reality that my life is his, and however he wants to use me, if he wants to use a full functioning version of me, or if he wants to use a not fully functioning version of me,
right?
That's his, it's his prerogative. That's his right. That's his choice. And he is good. And so I could trust him with that. And there was actually just like great freedom in that revelation that my identity, my effectiveness, what I have to offer the world, to the kids, to you, to the church, is not, based on how good I am or how well my body functions, but it's based on how God wants to use me.
Yeah, I think that's good. That even thinking about, for me in that moment, because we were having obviously separate thought patterns that were still, we could have partnered with.
It sums up together, and I'm scared.
Yes.
But what you were scared about and what I was scared about were, related, but a little bit different in terms of where it was coming from. Yeah.
And where we could have gone, and both of us having to do our own anchoring and figuring out, know the truth to come against those kind of lies or thoughts or fears. And for me, I'm convinced that, I would not have remembered that word that someone had. So just some backstory. You had gotten a word back in college.
Yeah.
No.
We had just started
post-college. We had just started dating. We were both done with school. We were interning. And a pastor had come into town, and he called you out of a crowd. And I just remember where I was sitting and seeing you and thinking, this is so weird. I'm dating this guy, but I don't really know him.
Or were we engaged? I think we were engaged.
No,
I think it was after Africa.
No, I'm pretty sure we were just dating.
Okay. All right. We'll go back.
We'll hash this out
deal with this
later.
Okay. Either way, we were not yet married.
I remember you standing up, and he spoke the word over that you're going to be ministering well into your 80s, like Caleb in Scripture.
Yep.
And that's all I remember. And it's not like we've gone back to this word very often. I don't know. Maybe you have.
I did when my dad died.
Okay. That's interesting. I didn't know that. You did not share that with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just finding this out.
7 years ago.
But then it's not one that we talk about very often. But in that moment when I'm like, I think I was just pulling for anything from God, like, God, where are you? What's happening? What's going on? And I'm convinced that he dropped that word in that moment so that I was able to come and speak that over you.
It was perfect.
And for both of us to remember, okay. And here's the thing I think I go back to is like, we don't know if that will happen, right? We're only in our 40s. We don't know. But in that moment, that brought the hope and the anchor that we needed in the Lord. And I think that is what I needed to fight some of those fears, some of those lies, some of this vain imagination that I could have gone down. I think for you, it helped anchor that too and kind of stop that process. But here's the other thing is like, these aren't new thought processes for us, right?
Yeah.
I've dealt with this in our past before. Like in our early years of marriage, like we talk about this a lot, even when we counsel married couples, right? We talk about the vain imagination specifically. I think that women deal with even more. I mean, I don't know. Guys,
I don't know.
Deal with
I was thinking about this today, and I think where does that vain imagination lead you? And this might be a huge overgeneralization, but I actually think women might struggle more with the outcome side of things, and men might struggle more with the identity side of things.
Oh, interesting.
That vain imagination related to identity. I think a lot of guys, there's kind of this pressure of like, what mark am I going to make on the world?
Right.
And I think for women, a lot of times there can be an outcome vain imagination of what if this happens? What if things go this direction?
A little bit more fear-based, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think women struggle with it a little bit more of like, you have a thought and it's easy to just start going down your spiral of your thoughts.
Yeah.
Right? Like I would think you wouldn't come home. Okay, when we were married with all the little kids, and I'm home, and my first thought is, you are coming home late. Oh, well, he doesn't want to be home with us.
Right. I remember that.
I'm a nagging wife, which I kind of was that season.
You weren't bad.
But our home life is crazy and busy. You would rather be at work. You must not enjoy your life at home. And I remember all those thoughts. Like, I'd be like cooking dinner, waiting for you to walk in the door. And I had already had a whole reason why you came home late. And it became my real. And I related to you that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I do remember that.
And then we'd have a fight.
I remember those nights. Yep.
Oh, y'all, we can laugh about it now because we worked way through it.
Whole season.
It was a whole season. But it was because of where I let my thoughts go.
Mm-hmm.
And it started with like one of those just fleeting little thoughts that now when you learn those kind of patterns that the enemy wants to use, right, and take you down, I've had to learn, no, that is not a healthy place. This is exactly what he's saying, take every thought captive. Like, those are the thoughts. They seem so almost silly at the time, so you don't even think that this could be the enemy.
Yeah, when you live in your head, it all feels very real.
It feels very real.
Once you talk about it, it starts to...
Yes. Because then I would share all this with you, and it would cause a whole kerfuffle, and it wasn't reality.
Yeah.
You would be like, that is not what I'm thinking. And I'm like, are you sure? And then I realized that I'm letting my thoughts go too much. And that is not healthy. And that is a place that the enemy can use and take me that is just not good. I think we all can naturally go there.
Absolutely.
What are some of yours then? Because those are mine. You need to share something.
Yeah. I mean, I think this most recent scenario, I think, is the most real and on the surface for me. But in terms of different vain imagination, I can go through, I've told you this before, I can make myself really sad thinking about outcomes, thinking about, like, I'll be on a plane. What would happen if, like, this plane goes down? And then what would Shireen's life be like? And then what about the kids? I start imagining what their lives would be like without me. Right. And I'll just go into this really, like, sad place.
Terrible.
And
our
again, that's not,
terrible,
God doesn't promise us tomorrow. So it's not like you find peace because you know you're going to land. You find peace because you know, however you do land, whether it's because the wheels came down or because you crashed, like the big God's got everybody in his hands, right? And God's got this thing. And so there is peace in that. I think that it just goes back to, I think if outcomes and identity are the big places where vain imagination take us, or the paths that vain imagination takes us on, I think knowing that God's in control and knowing that that we have relationship with him, and that he's good, those settle a lot of that.
Yeah. But in the moment, it's hard to pull that.
Oh, absolutely.
Why is it so hard to pull that?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So Jesus talks about temptation, right? And I think when he's hitting this, he's hitting on all of the forms of temptation, whether it's like the desires of my flesh or whether it's the thoughts in my mind, which is what we're talking about here. He tells us to pray, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. I think there's two insights there that are helpful. One, the enemy is the source of so much of the temptation. Right.
I mean, he was the one who tempted Jesus.
Yeah. Yes. So whether it's pulling on the desires of our flesh or whether it's kind of feeding us a particular way of thinking, I think the enemy is the source in many ways. But I also think the invitation to pray is what Jesus is getting at. Like, prayer is, it's not, I think we can hear this and think that it's because of this like spiritual transaction that will happen. If I pray, I will get strong and victorious over this way of thinking. Though there is a strengthening of our inner man, our and the Spirit of God strengthens us and builds us up. But I actually think what Jesus was getting at was that prayer is the context in which temptation loses its power.
Oh, okay.
So when you live a life of prayer, and you're praying this on a regular basis, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Like when you're praying on an ongoing basis, you're living in a deeper reality than where your thoughts may want to take you.
Yes.
And so when you are tempted to wonder, who am I? Identity questions. If you're living in the place of prayer, you're constantly reminded.
That's so true.
My Father who art in heaven. He's my Father. I'm his son. You're his daughter. Like, that's where my identity comes from. And then knowing that he provides for us, that he takes care of us, that he's good, all of those outcome questions get silenced.
Yep.
When we kind of are constantly communing with our Father who art in heaven. So
I think that's good. I also think it builds that relationship, right? So prayer builds a relationship where you are anchoring in who God is. You're learning who he is. You're building a relationship with him. You're in his word. It brings all of that together so that when you are in those places where those fleeting thoughts come in and they feel tempting to go to those places, that you can backtrack and go, no, wait, I know what is true. I think the funny thing is we think temptation is mostly like, I don't know. I always thought it was going to be like someone's going to come offer me drugs one day or something like, you know what I mean? Like they're going to tempt you to do 80s, something. Yeah. Yes. Just say no. Or instead, this is why I thought about this on my walk was like, no, it's those small little thoughts that we entertain and they just start swirling. And if we keep going, that is where we will get taken so far away from the truth of God and who he, like you said, who he says we are, or who, what he wants for our lives. And it's just it's just not where he wants us to go.
Yeah,
it is good. The way the enemy wants to pull us from God and from the truth of who we are in him and the truth of who he wants, like what he has for us in this life.
Yeah.
And then it's actually really like, and then it becomes a test, right? Yeah. Like that's really what all of this is. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have to look at at least our story of your health journey. Like it was a test of like, where am I anchoring? Where is God in this? Yeah. Where do I see him? What is real? What is true? Where am I going to stand in it? And how am I not going to get swept away by what's happening right now in the fear and the whatever? Yeah. And I
think so. Yeah, I think the very thing the enemy would use to tempt us into a dark place, the Lord uses that very thing to test us and hopefully move us into a better place. Right. And the enemy is the Lord's tool. Yeah, you do. Yeah,
I love to pass a test.
Yes, you do.
And I like to study.
I was less concerned with A's in life than you were.
So even thinking that this is a test that God has for me, I'm like,
gives you motivation.
What am I going to do to get this right?
Yeah.
But really, I mean, we do still need the tools.
Yeah, that's good. But even thinking about that, like, so when even if we realize it's a test, the temptation or the thought there could be, then I need to overcome this. So I got to use discipline, or I got to shake this out of my brain, or I got to stop thinking differently, retrain my mind. All those things are fine. But I actually think the way we pass tests that God brings us into is very different than acing a science test.
It's not as clear.
It's not as performative, turns out. I think it's
that's good.
Relational. I think it's kind of what happened to both of us in the emergency room was this re-surrender. Yes. I think the way we pass tests that God brings us into and that the enemy would want to use to take us down is by recognizing I am weak, I am scared, but he is strong, and so I'm going to lean into him.
It's leaning into him.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's relationship. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's an easy test to pass. I can do that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good. Yeah.
I think that's helpful.
I think anybody can do that. And that's, I think, why this is so good to talk about, because it removes performance from the conversation. It removes our need to get it right.
Yeah.
And it really, we find our victory through intimacy with God, not necessarily through how perfectly we run the race.
And I think the beauty of it is now, because that's why we're able to have this conversation. Mm-hmm. We are on the other side where you can look back in retrospect and see yeah, that could have been a temptation to go down those places. And instead, here's how I overcame.
Yes.
And here's how
That's good.
I passed the test.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I guess I don't know. Or whatever. And so but I think people still need tools. So like if someone's listening to this and hopefully saying, oh my gosh, that is like my thought life, or I tend to go down those places too. What are just tools? There's got to be still some tools.
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't you
say... What are practicals?
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you say, like, I think the rise of counseling...
Oh, yeah, for sure.
...is partly because people are discovering this, like, to talk about what you're thinking about.
Yes,
Find somebody to talk to.
You've got to share those thoughts.
And having a counselor is a great thing. We both have one.
Yeah.
But I think having friends...
I think friends...
Have some people in your life that you're not paying to listen to you, right,
Counselors are good.
They are. They're great. We both have them. But I also think that sometimes that can become someone's only outlet. Is I've got this one counselor that gets to hear everything. But like you said, when you were kind of struggling with some of this vain imagination early in marriage, you would tell me.
Yeah.
And then it kind of brought it to the light. And,
but then I would also go talk to other wives or people and share, and they're like, oh yeah, I struggle with this too, or and then you don't feel alone, and it is brought into the light, and you learn how to fight those kind of thoughts. I think you're right, bringing it into the light. It does make me think. I was talking about the temptation and testing and everything, obviously makes me think about Jesus, and I was listening to something that said that it was Jesus being tempted was him by himself, right? So similar to like, I'm in my own thoughts. But someone had to hear the story so they could record it. So he went and told his friends about this. Now, he overcame the test easy. But he still went and told his friends the story so that wouldn't live just, in the darkness. I mean, that's a good example. Like, we need to tell people when we are struggling with something, when even if we think this fleeting thought won't lead to anything, those are actually the things that I don't know. Yeah.
And then I think prayer. I mean,
absolutely.
Jesus's prescription is, pray that you would not fall into temptation. And so I think, but again, it's not, it is the supernatural transaction that happens when we pray. But I think it's if we live in a context of prayer, under the reality of who the Father is, then it silences a lot of the vain imagination.
I think so, for sure. So maybe those are some tools that will help people. Maybe
community and prayer. Turns out that's
what got us through this situation.
It totally did.
Totally did.
Brings a lot of good into our lives.
So hopefully this helps conversation helps you. Yeah. Okay, but before we go, we decided we wanted to end mostly because we like hearing what other people like are reading or doing or eating or listening to or watching.
Right.
So we wanted to share with all of our people. What are we watching?
What we're watching right now.
What are we watching?
I mean, college football just started.
Okay.
So.
Well, of course. Go Dogs. A lot
for me, yep.
But together, we like to watch TV together.
Yes.
Which
has severely limited my options. But in a good way. Okay. But like, there's only so much you like.
I'm kind of picky.
You don't want anything too intense.
No. Especially at night, not before I go to bed.
I know, and that's the only time we watch. So, but I mean,
and we only have one TV that we have in our public space to share. We don't have a TV in our bedroom.
Right.
And so we have to agree on what we're going to watch.
Totally. Yeah.
So we always try to find something we both enjoy watching.
And right now it's The Office.
We went back to The Office.
Started fresh.
And it is even funnier. It's fun because we're watching it with some of our older kids now.
Yes.
And now we're having to skip some parts.
They can't watch every episode.
They can't watch every episode. But it's really funny because we get to enjoy it with them. And I think it's
been fun to see what they pick up on.
I know. And then to see what they think is funny versus what we think is funny.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting. Yeah. But we love The Office.
It's a great show. I was hesitant that rewatching would not be as funny, and I think it's funnier. So good. It's so great.
It's even funnier the second time around.
It really is.
Totally. Yeah. So if you need to go back to The Office, or if you haven't watched it because you're a whole nother generation like our children.
True.
The Office. Check it out.
It's a good one.
Well, thanks for joining us on When We Walk. And we hope this conversation was helpful to you. And we will be with you next time.
All right. Bye.